Hi, everyone, and I hope you're all having a good week this week so far as we get started with our first chapter for effective group discussion, theory and practice. I'm using the 15th edition book. So if you're using an older edition, um, there may be some things that you may find a little bit different, but importantly, um, you'll find out that sort of a lot of the information is relatively the same. You may want to check with uh, with sort of the chapters just to make sure everything correlates. A lot of times you can get the chapter list of the new edition and compare it to the old edition to see if maybe some chapters are switched. But that's up to you. If you want to use the older edition, you'll have to take that risk. But I'm using the 15th edition, which is a newer edition. It came out last year and I held off on using it so that there could be a number of rental copies out there for you if you want to rent it. I also see that there's a lot of ebooks out there which are very affordable. So hopefully, if you've done this already, um, you can follow along with the book yourself. I actually have my ebook on my tablet right next to me. So as I'm lecturing, if you see me looking away and looking down, it's because I'm also following the book on my tablet to make sure I don't miss anything as we move forward. All right, so let's get started here. So one of the first question that's asked in the chapter is why groups are important. And I think one of the things that we realize is that there's a practical need for working in groups. In whatever you do, in every day of your life, you're going to find yourself in a group. And that group could be your group of friends, it could be your family, it could obviously be work. So group as a whole is important. We are not solitary people here. We will find ourselves with like-minded individuals and we will put ourselves together in the group. And that group may be social, like, a skateboarding group or EDM group, or something that sort of ties everybody together. But we're in groups all the time and we find ourselves in groups all the time. I mean, you're hardly ever alone. Even in social media, there's always groups of friends there. If you're an online gamer, you've got people that you play with. But the idea here is that we spend a lot of time with groups, and it's important to sort of recognize the importance of communication within that group setting. So, um, how is that important? Obviously, it's important to talk amongst those groups, but one of the things that's really important as we move forward in this class is to understand also the relationship of groups in a work environment, right? We all get paid to do a job, if not now, eventually. And a lot of times what that does is that will require us to work in a group setting. And interestingly enough, employers rank the ability to work in teams as more important than having an advanced degree. I want you to think about that for a second, right? Employers are looking for people who are able to work with other people. And a lot of times that's more important than someone who has an advanced degree. So you could have a master's degree, you could have a doctorate, but if you can't get along with other people, well, that degree doesn't mean anything, right? Versus having someone who may not necessarily have the advanced degree, but you know what? They're well liked, they work well, they're empathetic, they are a team player. And that is important. And it's recognized as important. Now, for us, as I mentioned earlier, group formation is natural for humans. We are not solitary people. We tend to form groups naturally. And sometimes those groups are done so in a fashion that's organized. Your boss will tell you, okay, this is where you got to work, this is who you're working with. And other times you'll have groups that just sort of form naturally, right? You may have a group of people that you work with at work, but you may also have a group of people that you hang out with at work. And those people aren't always the same people, right? And just because we often participate in groups, we cannot assume that we participate effectively. Think about that. So you're in groups all the time, all right? Doesn't mean you're good at it. It doesn't mean that you're doing the things that you need to do to give that group the best you can, to communicate effectively, to understand, to listen. All those things come into play, right? And individuals find satisfaction from contributing something larger than themselves. What does that mean? Well, really the realistic thing here is that when you form a group, it's not about you. It's about the team, right? It's about the group itself. If you excel in a group, but the group in itself fails, then that's not really the focus or the goal that you're trying to reach, right? In the end, when the group succeeds, you succeed. And that's the satisfaction. The satisfaction is seeing other people grow, seeing the group excel. And that will give you success. It's looking at it from a bigger picture and not an individual picture, right? Let's move on. So, let me turn off my phone here. So, what is a small group, right? Those are sort of, uh, what is a small group discussion? Sorry. And I'm following along here. I'm on page, what looks like page 7 through 8. Um, First one is interaction, right? And in interaction, it's really the idea here of us interacting with each other, right? If you're just having a group of people just standing there, but not saying anything, not interacting, it's not really a group. It's just a bunch of individuals hanging out in the same place. And that's not a group. That's just individuals. That's a lot of individuals. And so one of the things that makes a group is the interaction that takes place. The fact that they're interacting, they're talking, they're communicating. The next thing is mutual influence. It's the idea that the things that I say, the things that I do will have an influence on the other people. And the things that they say, that they do will have an influence on me. Okay? So think about that. And the next thing you have is an interdependent goal. And an interdependent goal exists when a group members succeed or fail together in the accomplishment of the group's purpose. Think about that. That's the idea that when you succeed as a group. Okay? It's not your goal, it's the group's goal. And it's really the idea of working together to achieve that goal because we are all as team members independent upon each other. Okay? The next one is what makes a group small. Hmm. Well, you have a group, right? But what's a small group? Well, let's think about that. One, not solely numbers, but it includes perceptual awareness. What does that mean? We're talking about perceptual awareness. We're talking about the idea that you are aware of the individuals who are around you. You are aware of what's going on in your surroundings. You are aware of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, who you're trying to accomplish it with, and why you're accomplishing it. Okay? The next thing is that a group usually consists of 3 to 7 members, with 5 being the most effective. All right, you could see that. Now, let's think about this for a second. Most people will see 3 as a minimum to a small group. And there's actually a really practical reason why 3 is a magic number. If you all know music and you all know hip hop, you know where that song comes from, right? 3 is a magic number. So the reason that 3 is the minimum number and why 2 is not considered a small group, it's very practical. If you have 2 people and they both disagree, then it's a tie. You have to make a decision to do something. I want to do this. I want to do that. So what happens? Nothing, right? You want to do this. You want to do that. And if we can't agree, what happens? Nothing. We don't move forward and we don't take steps to proceed. And so what happens is that when you have 3 people, that means 2 people can agree on something and one person doesn't have to. And even though this person disagrees, guess what? 2 is the majority. And therefore, when you have the majority vote, then this person says, all right, I don't want to do it, but as a group, we'll move forward. Okay? And a lot of times that's how you make a decision. That's why you have a term like majority vote. Now, next thing you have is 7. Why is 7 the maximum number of people? And we'll probably have maybe about 7 or 8 people in your teams as you go through this class. But why is 7 the maximum amount of people? Well, that's pretty practical too. The reason being is that when you have a small group, that means you get to know everybody in your group. That means that everybody within your group has a name, has a past, has a history, has a relationship with everybody else in the group. And when you have too many people, then you can't form that relationship, right? You can, and think about it. Try to remember, try to think of a group where you can remember everybody's name. Chances are it's probably about 5 to 7 people. In this class, when you've gone to class, if you try to remember the names of everybody in this class, it's very unlikely to do it. It's very hard to remember the names of 25 to 30 people. It's hard, especially when you don't interact with them quite a bit. And so when you have between 5 and 7 members, you can remember their names, you can remember their faces, you can get to know them, you can have conversations with them, you can become personal. And so the idea that you can then sort of create a relationship with members of your group makes your group that much stronger. Okay, let's move forward. The other thing is each member perceives all others as individuals, shares some identity or common purpose, and shares standards for governing their activities as members. Let's break that down a little bit at a time. So the first part here is each member perceives all others as individuals. Well, that means that I see you, right? I see you for who you are. I see you as an individual, and I see that person, and I see that person, and I see that person. And everybody's different. You're not just saying everybody's the same, and I'm going to treat you all the same. No, it means everybody's different. You may have somebody in your group who's very shy, for example, who doesn't talk very often. And so, therefore, you may want to talk to them a little bit differently. You may ask them questions to bring them out of your shell. You may have someone who's very confident, right? Who lets their voice heard and isn't afraid to speak their mind. Well, that's a person you may not have to worry so much about how you speak with them because you're always going to hear them. And so the idea here is making sure that you know everybody in the group and that everybody knows you. The next thing is that you share some identity or common purpose. Well, what do we have in common? What are the things that we're doing in order to achieve the goal that puts us in a common place, right? So one thing that you all have in common is you're all students. There's a certain commonality there, right? Being a student, whether you're older or younger, still puts you sort of in a group and you have that in common, okay? This next thing here is that you share standards for governing their activities as members. As a group, you will have certain standards that as a group you will form as to how you will conduct yourself in meetings, how you will act towards each other, and all that stuff, right? And some of those standards are universal, right? Treating each other with respect and so forth and so on. But there are some things that you're going to figure out that's really just tied to you and your group. Sorry. And so there's these standards that come up, and some of these standards are written and some of them are unwritten. And those are things that we sort of learn as we go along and we sort of communicate with other members of our team. Okay? So we talked about the awareness. We talked about um, being able to be aware of the people who are in your group. We talked about being mutually interdependent upon each other to achieve the goal that we want to have. We also talk about how members have to have a sense of belonging. We want to be able to to be a part of the group. We want to be part of the group. We want to feel welcome. Okay, and then the interaction involves verbal and nonverbal behaviors. It means that we want to be able to interact with you, and our interactions come in both what we say and also on how we look, if we smile, right? Are we being are we acting in a way that promotes communication, or are we just sitting there quietly with our head down? Makes a big difference. right? So a lot of times they say actions speak louder than words, and that's what we're talking about when we say nonverbal cues. Okay. Now, the next thing is that there's a sense of cooperation among members. What does that mean? That means that amongst the group, we have to cooperate with each other. We communicate with each other in a way that's not distancing and pushing, but rather bringing, cooperating, right? And an interaction occurs on a continuum from purely face-to-face to purely virtual. That means that the communication that you have with your groups will be face-to-face sometimes, and sometimes it'll be virtual, right? It'll be done online, it'll be on Skype, it'll be on FaceTime, or it'll be over the phone. So it continues. It will never stop as long as your group is together. Now, you have the first type of group is you have your primary group. Okay. Now, in your primary group, and let me see what page we're on here. See if I can find the page that we're on. Um, Here we go. So I'm on page, what looks like page. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling here. Looks like page 10. So the first type of group is you have your primary group. And in your primary group, you have what's called inclusion, right? And inclusion really is defined as affiliation, belonging, and openness. That's where you affiliate with the person or the groups, I'm sorry, with the people who are in that group. You can affiliate with them. You belong with them. And you're open with them, which means that you can communicate with them and they can communicate with you. And an example of that is your nuclear family and your group of friends. Nuclear family could be your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, right? That's your core group. You belong to them. You affiliate with them, right? You carry their last name, right? And you're open to communicating with them. Same thing with your friends, right? That's your primary group, right? Your secondary group are a group whose major purpose is to complete a task such as making a decision, solving a problem, writing a report, or providing recommendations to a parent organization. So, for example, the groups that you're going to form here in class or the group that you form at work, that could be your secondary group. Okay. The next things are activity groups, and these are to participate in an activity. Uh, you play bridge. Bridge is a way of playing cards, bowling, and so forth. So sometimes in an activity group is a group of people that you participate in an activity with that may not necessarily be all of your friends. It could be, but it isn't always the case. So as an example, there are a group of people that are my friends, but they don't golf, and so there are another group of people that I don't associate myself too many times, except when I go golfing. They're my golf buddies. And so you have sort of that difference. Had it not been for golf, I may not associate myself as much or as often. So that activity actually lends itself to being part of that group. And then you have what's called personal growth groups. And personal growth groups, they develop personal insights. They overcome personality problems and grow personally through feedback and supporting of others. And these could be something that you do for like your church group. As an example, these are support groups, and sometimes these are support groups through our faith or through any other type of organization that supports us in the things that we're trying to accomplish as we become better people. Now, the next thing you have here is educational groups. Now, educational groups, and these are for learning, these are study groups. These are learning groups, often called study groups, formed so that members can understand a subject better by pooling their knowledge, perceptions, and beliefs. And in many cases, these are the groups that you're going to form now. Now, I mentioned earlier that a secondary group could be the groups that you're forming in order it's a second group, and it is like that second group. An educational group is trying to form something, but study groups are usually temporary, right? And they're really just for that purpose of education. You have problem solving groups. In problem solving groups, these groups are really put together to just solve a problem. These are groups together that are really just for the purpose of fixing something, usually like at work, right? So if you work at a retail store and you're having issues with low morale, for example, just employees are not enthused to be at that particular store. You put together a group of people, maybe 3 or 4 individuals who are employees, and say, hey, how can we improve morale in the store? And as a group, you say, okay, the problem is low morale. What's a solution for it? How do we solve that? And so you then come up with a few types of solutions: employee of the month, pizza Fridays, casual Fridays. Something that'll sort of um, help the morale, right? That's a solution that you come up with. And a lot of times what happens is you'll you'll address the particular problem, and you'll form a committee, and that committee could be standing, which means that it never ends. As long as the company exists, that committee will stay there. Or it could be ad hoc, which means that after the problem is solved, then the committee disperses. Okay. And then you have quality control circles, which are really just there to make sure that the solution actually does what it's supposed to do. You have self-managed work groups, and this is a small group of peers who determine within a prescribed limits of their own work, their schedules, and their procedures. And what that means is these are almost kind of like virtual teams, right? If I'm a boss, I'm going to assign a project to 3, 4, 5 people, and I say, okay, this is the project. This is when I need to get it done. Go get it done, right? And you as a group will determine whether you work nights, whether you work days, whether you want to get it done early or whether you want to procrastinate, but you just know that the deadline is on this day. So you are here and you need to get here. How you get there, that's up to you, right? And then a top management team is a team composed of top officers of an organization charged with making a complex strategic decision. Now, the top management teams are usually the top executive teams. These are like a board, for example. These are like the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the president, the vice president. These are the top management who make the decisions on how to proceed or how to solve a problem. Okay? So the next thing we have here is ethics, right? Some ethical principles for groups. Well, when you're talking about ethics, these are the rules or standards for appropriate conduct. This is how we act within that group. Okay? These are the rules that we have to abide by. This is integrity, professional and social responsibility, equality of opportunity, honesty and openness, and respect for self and others. And these are things that don't necessarily just apply to groups, these are things that apply everywhere, right? But as a group, you need to have this in order to really move forward. Some of the principles that we're talking about is you have to be willing to speak, think, and participate. So as a member, you can't just sit there and be quiet. You have to participate. You have to speak, and you have to think about these ideas so that when somebody says, hey, what are your thoughts and ideas? What do you think? You don't say, oh, I don't care, right? You actually voice a thought and opinion. You say, yeah, I think it's good because of this. No, I disagree with, maybe we should do it this way, right? You have to be willing to do those things. You have to contribute your fair share. No social loafing, which means that you don't ride somebody else's coattails. It means that you don't do the minimum while everybody else is doing the work and then you get part of the grade. That doesn't work either, right? You have to do your fair share. And then the last thing here is you have to embrace diversity in all its elements, socioeconomically, culturally, racially. We're a very diverse population and we have to embrace everybody's ideas and everybody's backgrounds, regardless of what those backgrounds are. You want to make sure that you act with honesty and integrity. Be honest about what you're saying. Be truthful. Treat other members with respect. And then you gather and evaluate information thoroughly and diligently. And what that means is that as you get all this information coming to you, look at it, read it, understand it, read it thoroughly. and diligently. Make sure that it sticks in your mind so that when you discuss it, you know exactly what you're talking about and you're just not making things up, filling in the blanks. In summary, um, we kind of uh, we kind of talked about why groups are important. We talked about the 3 points of groups. We talked about what is small group discussion. We talked about the types of small groups, and we also talked about the ethical behavior of group members. So as we move along and we start talking about the other chapters, you'll get a better idea of not just what groups are, but as we move on, how to communicate effectively within those groups. All right. So I'm hoping you enjoyed this first chapter of a great book that I hope hopefully will have an influence in the way you interact with others in your group setting, both in personal and professional life. And I'm looking forward to you taking part in the rest of the class. All right. Take care. If you have any questions, be sure to email me and I'll be sure to respond and get together with you. Thank you so much. Take care.